And one of the biggest challenges people run into is bridging that conversation gap. So case in point, I'll talk about it a little bit. When you say I retired, well, to us, that means honorable service. That means you did your full commitment. You delivered a huge amount of value, and it's a thing to be respected. Generally, in corporate America, when you say I retired from the military and now I'm doing this, they think you're on a beach with a Mai Tai somewhere. So it's just a totally different mindset. And it's one of those little conversational like blowups that can derail you and you never see it coming. So when I left the Air Force, I had a job that really immediately transferred to the public sector, to civilian, and that was purchasing. So I think to myself, okay, this is going to be easy. So I took my DD 214 and I looked at it and it said craftsman. It said contracting craftsman. Well, when I was in, I negotiated contracts with Nobel Prize winning scientists. I opened the former Soviet Union to doing business with the West. I had a ton of stuff in my military career that did not show up on my DD 214. And that was my first big wake up call that I needed to tell my own story rather than letting anybody else tell my story for me. And that led to my first civilian job, oil and gas, doing technology procurement for oil and gas, fairly steady move over. Wow, I learned a lot of stuff from that. The most important thing I learned is that I got played. That company was a master at speaking the military language, bringing military people on board when we didn't know our value, had no idea what our skills commanded on the civilian side in terms of salary. And their standard was, hey, come in, you're coming out of the service. We want you to really, get a good start, and then we'll move you up. We'll promote you. We'll do this. We'll do that. A lot of promises, none of which were followed through on. That's not a problem with that one company. I then was part of the problem at other companies. I did the same thing to people. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. The key thing that I want you to take away, if you listen to nothing else from me, is your first job is critical because it baselines your salary. Most companies will not allow a new hire to get more than a 10% uplift on their last year's W-2. So that means you think to yourself, okay, look, I'm just going to take this job, then I'll level up. It took me about 5 years to recover from the salary level I agreed to at my first job out of the military, because each time the HR director would say, wow, I wish we could really pay you what you're worth, but we have this rule. There's a bypass through that, but it involves going out into startups, and that may be a little bit more risk than a lot of people are willing to take. So I did startups after that oil and gas company, and then that led to me joining Dell. And in Dell, I was responsible for negotiating with public sector. Every deal that came through, my team did the proposal, did the negotiations, closed the deal. It was a terrific job. Dell's a fantastic company to work for. I know one of your speakers is going to be from there this week. That's terrific. The challenge was that I wasn't learning anything new. I was just going through all of the dance steps from my federal procurement background backwards in high heels. That's the old joke that Fred Astaire, everything Fred Astaire did, Ginger Rogers did, but she was going backwards in high heels. When you're on the sell side of the equation, it's a totally different world, but I wasn't learning anything new. So I decided to jump from federal, where I had a ton of background, into state and local government, where I had none. And that's one of the things I'd really suggest as you're thinking about those first roles, the things you want to do. What are you going to be learning that's new? What are you going to be learning that's different? Because a lot of us, when we leave the military, really want to trade on the skills and experiences we have. And absolutely, you should. That's how you're going to get most of your money. But ask yourself, what new are you going to be doing as well? Because the last thing you want to do is repeat the last 5 years you had in the military with your first 5 years out in the civilian world. So I was at Dell for a number of years, loved it, then quit. You'll notice I got really, really blunt about that. I didn't exit, I didn't leave, I didn't pursue other opportunities. I had an opportunity to go into the game industry. And so I took a 75% pay cut and took over as the COO of a game company that had been around for decades. And did it because I wanted to. I realized I was getting stale. So I jumped industries, I jumped everything. It was the first time I'd ever worked with people who were on weed most of the time. And as somebody coming out of the military, Air Force, negotiations background, I couldn't even drink in public. Suddenly I have to tell people, could y'all close the door to the shipping dock? Because that is just funneling upstairs to my office and I'm eating so many Doritos right now. It was such a totally different culture. And it shocked my brain because going from military to oil and gas to Dell, very much, institution, institution, institution. Suddenly, I'm in a totally different environment. And that was valuable. And that led to me doing a number of startups and really growing my capability by going in and being a consultant, being a coach, being a fractional chief operating officer for a lot of different companies, all of which led to me joining Oracle. At Oracle, they needed somebody to go into Europe. I've spent the last 4 years of my military career in Europe and take it over as all negotiations, all business practices. One of the things I want you to look at in my bio is I talk about we enabled $8 billion worth of sales. We covered more than 60 countries and all the sales teams. I don't lead with, I led an organization of 280 people because so many people out in the civilian world, we make the mistake of thinking our value is based on how many people report to us in an organization. And that is a very 10, 15-year-old way of thinking. These days, it's what results did you get? What value did you create? Well, I enabled $8 billion a year in revenue. How did you do that? Then we drill into that. As you might imagine, I've hired, fired, and interviewed thousands of people. And I always do what Elon Musk is really world class at. You start asking how, and you start going down the rabbit hole of exactly how they deliver the results. So at Oracle, it was a terrific gig. I mean, I was in London again, and I was responsible for all of Europe. Had a huge personal setback, and that led to me reevaluating all of my priorities. And I think Aaron had a really good point just now about, the sacrifices you make with your family. I lost my wife when she was 44 years old. And the advantage to us was we had lived the first 16 years as if we were retired. We went job to job. We didn't have a family yet. And so we were able to take huge risks. Well, when I lost her, I had a 5-year-old son. So suddenly, the massive corporate career path that I was on, no. So I had to move to Florida from Austin and London and really raise my kid. So that led to a complete reshaping of my priorities. And that led to me starting Palisade Compliance, essentially fighting the company that had been so good to me, Oracle, by challenging Oracle when it goes to its customers and says, hey, we're going to do a software license audit. Palisade is a very successful company. We started it from zero. It's a 7-figure company. 25% of the Fortune 500 are clients. It's a tremendous achievement. And I loved every minute I ran it. But after 10 years of running it, once again, I needed to do something different. So I exited. When you leave a startup, always say you exited because it implies you got a bunch of money from it. You didn't, but you always say you did. So that's the key. The language is important. So I exited Palisade because I wanted to start playing in commercial space and AI. And that's what I do today. I'm a growth advisor for companies that are rapidly growing in those two areas. I live on the space coast of Florida. I'm 16 miles from the launch pad, so commercial space was an easy lift. AI is tougher because AI is not really prevalent in Florida all that much. But so that's more of my national stuff. That's my background. That's where I came from. So I went from leaving the military, learning a ton of hard lessons, getting to the top of the Fortune 500, turning all that off, and then building again as an entrepreneur from zero to success. And so that's where I'm coming from. That's the advice I'm going to be giving you today. Let me pause there, Matt, and see if there's anything you want to break in before I keep rolling on.
No, I appreciate that overview and just obviously the experience, expertise you bring from from your career to now and where you're at now. I had something I was captivated by what you were saying, and I completely lost my train of thought with you're into AI. You have gone from obviously you started out taking your experience and expertise from the Air Force straight into a kind of a lateral career kind of into the oil and gas using the skill sets and stuff like that. When you are obviously you did Palisades for 10 years. When you're going through your career, how far out do you look? Do you look at say, hey, this is my 5-year plan, this is where I want to be, or this is my 10-year plan? And then basically milestone it and then say, okay, well, I'm here now. Let's look at it. I want to be here next. And then once I'm here, now I'm going to take that skill somewhere else. Do you look at those as you're going through your career? Did you look at that? Like, 5-year or 10-year plan as you were planning, or did it kind of say circumstantial based, I'm here now, let's look for a change? How did you come to the realization that after 10 years in Palisades specifically, like it's time to move on or it's time to exit, as you said?
There you go. I think the old quote, I don't know if it's Eisenhower or somebody who said no battle was ever won without a plan. Planning is essential, but no battle ever goes according to plan. So I had a plan. My plan has never worked out. My plan, my 5-year plan, my 8-year plan, I've got it. Still have one. It's beautiful. I take it out every once in a while and I look at it. The thing I use it for, though, is to say, am I generally heading in a direction I want to go? And then, I don't expect everything to go according to plan. I think if you lose a spouse, you realize, what is it, man plans, God laughs. That's the old expression. And so that I think is the key. The thing is, you have to know what direction you're going, especially when you're making this transition, because otherwise the world will tell you what you're doing. There are so many people out there who have a roadmap for you. They have a program they want you to be in their company. They have a structure they want you to fit into. And if you want that, grab that. That's perfect. There's some fantastic resources. If, however, you don't feel that's exactly right for you, ask some questions. I spend a huge amount of time chatting back and forth with AI, really because you can tell one of the platforms challenge me on everything. And so now I have a friend in my computer who relentlessly challenges me on everything I'm thinking. And do that with your career. Do that with your plan. I think that would be the biggest thing. Not all of us are married to a spouse who's willing to challenge us. Fortunately, today I am married to one, so I never have to really worry about being challenged on stuff. So let me jump ahead to section 4 of the talking points. And again, if there's any questions, feel free to hit me from any direction. And that's the difference between cost center and profit center thinking. This has been something when I'm working with executives who came out of the military or newly transitioning people. Every single person who's on this call who's in the military, you are in a cost center. And trust me, one of the biggest amounts of trouble I ever got in when I was in the military was turning my military unit into a profit center. We were actually making money. You could do that in Europe at the time because it was tough for anybody to really see what you were doing. And so everybody who's on this call, who's in the military and transitioning out, you are in a cost center from the civilian world, from the civilian point of view. What you do is a mission. What you value is the results. And that is laudable. And that's exactly the mindset that the military needs. The challenge is when you go immediately from that into a cost center out in the civilian world, you expect to get the same level of respect. You are awesome at project management. You are a fantastic leader. You have all of these things that you bring to the table. The challenge is that in the civilian world, cost centers have to justify their existence every single day. Every year, we want to eliminate cost centers. We want to outsource. We want to automate. We want to move stuff around. We want to eliminate. And increasingly today, we're using AI. AI doesn't go after profit centers as much, parts of the company that go and sell and make money. They go relentlessly after cost centers. So a couple of examples there that are actually people I've talked to. One person, fantastic logistics manager, cost center. Logistics is a cost in every company in the world. And it's a cost they want to reduce and get rid of in every company in the world. The advice I give these people is think about that skill as being the thing that makes a company money. So logistics manager. What if you're a logistics manager for an outsourced logistics company that companies can go to and pay to do their logistics for them? You just went from being a pure cost center to being the product somebody sells. There's an intrinsic value to that. So as you're thinking about what you do, think about, okay, what wouldn't cost money? A couple of other examples. Terrific one. This guy's actually one of the people who got me on the journey of helping veterans again. He was a hospital manager, hospital tech manager, which is a hugely transferable field. Terrific. The challenge is cost center. Hospitals are absolute radioactive death on costs these days. And so what he's signing up for is to endlessly be justifying his existence. The thing is, you can make double the money by going and being a solutions engineer for a software company that sells to hospital tech company managers. You just went from being a cost center to a profit center. And I'm flogging the heck out of this, but it is a common challenge for people leaving the military mindset just to realize how rudimentary this is to civilian thinking. Final example, leadership. We all think of leadership as being intrinsically valuable, and it is, but it's also a cost center. And that is a huge thing to get our heads around. If you're leading an organization that processes paperwork, that is a pure cost center. And you, as the leader, are going to be constantly defending your people against attack. It's just the way it works. So you might think about my leadership skills. Where do those leadership skills make money? What parts of the company make money? And how do I lead there? Because trust me, the money's better. The drawback to that is the accountability is higher. But people leaving the military tend to not really have a concern about accountability. You're used to being accountable every single day. So I'm going to kind of pause there on section 4 before I jump. Once you understand this profit center, cost center thing and reshape your thinking to look for those, you can actually really help yourself quite a bit.
Oh, I've never thought of it in that context. I don't think anybody, I don't know, cost center versus profit center, when it comes to that. But as you spoke, like, especially, because my background's admin, right? All admin. And you talk about like the AI functionality and the, transition over is from cost center to profit center and stuff like that. I mean, that's straight cost center. I mean, HR admin, that's a huge cost center from my perspective.
And I think the thing that shocked me out of my complacency was I was at Dell and I took a 35% staff cut to my organization that negotiated deals. So I was a profit center, but I still took a 35% staffing cut and I could replace any of those people I wanted to, but they had to be in India. And I really began to realize, wow, this outsourcing thing, it's now hitting the thing I do. And I have to make a choice. I can either be the guy in the movie Office Space who's really good with the customers, or I can be one of the Bobs on the other side of the table, driving the change. And I went to the dark side and I became one of the Bobs. So I think that's the thing to think about when you think about where you want to land. Um, if you're not using AI right now, you really should. It is a fantastic tool, and you need to be very comfortable with it. You need to be comfortable with AI as you're interviewing now, the way you needed to be comfortable with Microsoft Office 10 years ago. It's not optional. It's a requirement. A lot of you have justifiable security concerns, especially I use ChatGPT all the time, and now that means the media can look at everything I've ever typed. But fortunately, I'm not typing anything I'm really scared about. So I think that's the thing. Figure out a low risk way for you to do it. I'm going to jump to section 5. Sections 5 and 7 is where I usually get a lot of pushback, and it's around jargon and the way we talk about things. The first thing I want to challenge a little bit is this notion of translating your experience. When I left the military, I was told in all good conscience by the people running transition to, no, don't talk about what you did in terms of being a leader. Talk about running a branch office. Talk about, running an office in a company that has minimal oversight from corporate. And I thought at the time that was ridiculous. I'll tell you why in a minute. But then I was in a transition class with some clients a couple of years ago, and I heard the same advice. They're still using the phrase branch office. I haven't talked about a branch office in corporate in 20 years. That is a very, very, very old term of art. And so you're translating sometimes. The way I look at translation with the military is right now, you're building a stereo and the instructions are in Korean. And a lot of times you're translating from Korean to German to English and hoping that what you're getting out the other end in English is going to make any sense at all. So sometimes you're translating from what you do through what you think the civilian world is out to the real civilian world. And that's the stereo instructions that say, do not pull this black plug. And if you've pulled it, don't put it back in. It's a tough lift. The way I tend to look at it is what I call reframing. And I give a couple of examples in the talking points. One is the temptation to say I was a contracting officer. Well, that opens up. Now I need to explain I was enlisted, but saying I was an officer, that's a tough lift in order to explain. So it invites a lot of pushback. So you reframe. I manage procurement for a $200 million operation. Okay, good. That's a direct thing that people out in the civilian world can get their hands on. Then I moved from procurement into sales. Suddenly, the fact that I bought didn't mean anything. What did you sell? So I had to reframe. Now I'm not just saying I managed procurement for a $200 million organization. I had to say I made $10 million deals happen. Notice I'm now no longer talking about the military. I'm not even talking about procurement anymore, but I'm still fixated on the one thing somebody cares about, which is the number of dollars. And it was a deal and it happened. And that's me. The next question is, how did you make it happen? And you have to be ready to answer that. That's when you'll get into a little bit more specifics. But I think that when I teach people how to network, I really talk a lot about how to reframe because reframing is your friend. It is translation on steroids. The next thing, and I already touched on this, talked about I retired. And wow, I make a lot of people angry when I say that. But just, if you want to yell at me, do so in the comments. It's awesome. That'll drive engagement. But just be careful about using that phrase. And think about when you talk about your service, talk to somebody who doesn't know you, who's never been in the military. Use some of your best networking conversations and see what they take away from it. Because it doesn't matter what you said. It doesn't matter what you think you said. It doesn't even matter what they heard. It's what they walk away with. Because 99% of the people you meet networking cannot help you at all, even the tiniest little bit. But every single one of them knows somebody who can help you. So your job is not to sell the people you're networking with on you. That's meaningless. Your job is to educate them about what's cool about you so that they're excited to tell people they know about you. And that's what gets jobs. So I really believe resumes haven't really worked for years. COVID really drove the final nail in the coffin in a lot of ways. And so often, the reason you're having trouble getting attention is a little thing buried in civilian organizations called the job description. And Matt, please rein me back in if I'm going way too off the reservation here.
No, I love this because I think we get this conversation a lot with our students, right? That they're applying for 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 applications, using a targeted resume, right? That they've used, AI to kind of translate and stuff like that from the job description. And even though they check every single block and they would be a perfect fit, they don't get a callback, they don't get an interview, nothing.
Let me hit you with a little dose of cynicism. I've been involved in hundreds of job descriptions redrafting exercises over the last 20 years. They're all crap. I figure this audience I can say crap. So I'm just gonna go on the edge here. Here's the problem. I ran Europe. The lady who ran North America and I didn't get along. Just didn't get along. She's a great person, but she had North American problems. I had Europe problems. Guess what? We shared all the same job codes for negotiator. So my team and her team had to argue about every single line of the job description. And we would fight and we would fight and we would fight. I needed people who were multilingual. She didn't care about multilingual. She needed people who understood interstate commerce, didn't care. So just all that back and forth. What the job description ended up saying, and this is 2009, that's important in a second. What the job description ends up saying is the least common denominator about what neither one of us cared enough about to argue anymore. We just got sick of it and we just greenlit something. Because in 2009, I knew that the job description is going to go out there. I'm going to get a lot of crap, but then a human's going to look at it and weed out the garbage. And then what I'll get is a human's judgment about what the job really entails. That doesn't happen anymore. First thing that killed it was ATS, the applicant tracking system. We started to automate more and more and more of that. But everything in ATS is based on job descriptions. Remember the job description we didn't care enough about to make right? Well, now we're using AI. And AI is going through, and it's kind of like Hal, the computer in the movie 2001. We found out in the movie 2010, the reason Hal went nuts is because humans were lying to him all the time. Well, guess what? The job description is lying to the AI about what they're looking for. So AI is going out there and finding somebody who meets every single thing. And then a different part of the AI says, okay, I interviewed the hiring manager. Here's what they care about. Boom. This is what the first AI route went. Here's the truth. They're just hitting against each other. It's the reason why networking is the only way to get in. And nobody wants to hear that. We all, especially people leaving the military or leaving academia or any big organization, we want to believe that somebody's in charge out here, and nobody is. And it is a mess. So I think that's the thing. Put your emphasis on networking. Your resume is really important, but it belongs at the end of the job hunting process. It's not the calling card that necessarily gets you the attention. So, you're going to find out what people care about by listening to them. And so I want to make sure I leave some time for questions. So I'm going to hop ahead a little bit. I do say one thing that pisses a lot of people off. This last thing in section 5, don't exclusively lean into being a veteran. One of the things I do with a lot of my executive coaching clients, many of whom are tremendously proud of their Harvard background. What I keep having to tell them is nobody gives a crap about your Harvard background. If you're spending more than 50% of your time with your Harvard buddies and your Harvard alumni group and going to the Harvard Yale game, that's all awesome. Nobody cares about it. In fact, it pisses some people off. So, because you've limited yourself to being a Harvard guy or being a former DJ or being this or being that. So, one of the things I really, really suggest is definitely be a member of veteran organizations. Support them just like I'm working with y'all. Make it less than 50% of your outreach, because you really aren't doing it right if you're not the only veteran in your bass guitar class, or you're this, or you're that, or you're the other. Because remember, 90% of people have no idea what we're talking about. You are the bridge, that 90%. So go through your veteran network, use it as a source of introductions, tremendously valuable, support the community, do other stuff too. So, and like I say, that irritates a lot of people because they're like, look, the veterans are the only one who speak my language. And that gets into section 7, which is how not to get played. I'm going to skip over a lot of the stuff in section 7 and just focus on the very last one, which is don't get played. Because the only company I've ever worked at that didn't play veterans was Palisade Compliance, because I was chief operating officer. I get to make the calls, right? Now, what do we say play? None of this is intentional. The biggest thing to get our heads around is nobody cares about anybody out here. We all want to, we all say we do, that sort of thing. But remember, people care about themselves first. Maybe they care about their family. The distant third is the people they work with. Distant fourth is the company they work for. There's a continuum of nobody caring about anybody, which is tough to get our heads around. The thing is, if I've got somebody who's a veteran who doesn't know what they're worth, and I've got somebody who's not a veteran who's asking for what the market wants, who's an unscrupulous manager going to hire? They're going to hire somebody who doesn't know what they're worth. They're also going to hire somebody who doesn't know what they're worth and will work their butts off, because that's just win-win for the unscrupulous hiring manager. Now, most people don't do that on purpose, but even the best people, when they see a bargain, they'll grab it. And if I'm a hiring manager and I've got a 15% reduction in my budget for next year, but I need to hire people, the temptation is really there to hire people who undervalue themselves. You can find out what you're worth a lot easier now than you could 5 years ago. So figuring out what your skills command on the civilian market is crucial. Another key, watch out for companies who are going to hire you because they speak your language. I'm on the East Coast of Florida. There's a ton of defense contractors here who speak the military language, and they hire a lot of people directly out of the service, and that's fine. That's laudable. The thing to remember is those companies are entirely programmatically based. They're hiring you to be on this helicopter project that's very similar to what you did in the military. When the helicopter project goes away, what's your next step? Be thinking about that when you're looking. And don't let yourself go into sort of a bubble community of, well, they speak my language, because you'll never find out what you're worth. You're only going to be talking to people who speak your language. Kind of like me going to work for the game company. Suddenly I learned a bunch of things, not least of which that Apparently tape is dangerous when you've been smoking. So, but that's the important thing. Challenge yourself and really stretch it out. The other thing to realize is salary scales in big companies are based on people who really started delivering value in the workforce at the age of 24 to 26. Well, you were delivering value at 19. And so they're going to try to tell you, well, you're coming out of the service, you've got a lot of things to learn. They're right, you do. I've got some great stories about the things I needed to learn, but you're going to learn fast. That's the thing to push back on. When they say you've got to learn stuff, you're absolutely right. I had to learn fast or I wouldn't be here. Terrific comeback to that in the interview process. But then realize they're going to undervalue your experience merely because of how old you are, because all their systems are designed for the 96+% of people who never served. So they don't know. It's not like they're trying to cheat you. The system is just not geared for us. The final thing, there's no excuse for not doing research. The reason I say that is you can go to ChatGPT or Grok or Claude or whatever and say, I need a research strategy to get good at this industry group. Because if you're going for a job, the first thing you need to figure out is not what skills do you have, this, that, and the others. How does that job contribute to what the company is trying to do? How does that company make money? How do they stay in business? And then what role would I have in that? If you start your research from that point of view, you're not going to get called out on any questions during the interview process because you're going to know how they make money. It's embarrassing when I would interview people at a giant software company who've never heard of my company. It's a $60 billion company. If you got paid last week, it's because the paycheck processed through their systems. It's an enormous company, but nobody, I would interview people who hadn't even done that level of research. So use the tools that are out there. So I'm going to stop because we've got a few more minutes for questions, but otherwise I'll keep talking faster.
No, I appreciate that. And you brought up something earlier, obviously, and you're heavily involved, you're more involved in it now, right? On the AI side. And you've talked about it numerous times, right? Use AI, use AI. We got
Yeah.
actually one of our students last week, he talked about, there's so many speakers that come on here and says use AI, use AI. But it's like, oh, there he is right there. And
Cool.
I'm gonna let him ask that question because
Yeah, do it.
it's straight from him. Go ahead, John.
Hey Stephen, thanks for coming to talk to us today. Yeah, it was me talking about the AI thing. So I guess to make this question just a little bit easier on you, can you give us like an example or two of like what specifically companies are looking for? Like you kind of gave us the example a little bit of like, hey, like it's kind of like the same skill set as being proficient with like Microsoft Office. So like what I got from that was if you came in, 10 or 15 years ago and you knew how to use macros or you knew how to do, pivot tables in Excel, like that kind of blew people's mind. So like what's like the AI equivalent of that like right now?
Cool. I've got a couple because I remember I'm also in sales. So I use AI for sales a lot. You're in sales too. The product you're selling is yourself. So what I'll ask AI for is what are the top 20 competitors of this company? Show me how that company is faring in this particular market space. Give me media sites where I can go and learn about how that company is doing my particular thing. And remember, AI hallucinates, so sometimes it makes stuff up. So what I do is I take the results from one AI platform and I hand it to a different one and say, hey, ChatGPT, I think Grok is lying to me. Fact check this. And it'll go through and it says, oh yeah, I can't find any of these sites. Grok is out of his mind. And so get the AI platforms arguing with each other. Then you go to the interview and they say, what do you think my top competitors are? Well, I did an AI search on that. And what I came up with was this one, this one, and this one. Am I anywhere near close? And whether you're right or not is less significant than you did it. That's one area. The other area I use AI for a lot is just to tell it, okay, you are a hiring manager who's going to look at this email. I did it with the thing that I just uploaded to y'all. This is 400 or so pages of transcripts. And I fed it into this and said, it's this academy. They have this concern. Go through all that crap and distill down the things they care about. And it came out with this. Then I wrote from there. A lot of this is my stuff. But that's a couple of uses of AI that when you're interviewing, they hit you with questions during the interview process. How do you use AI in your personal life? And you say, I just used AI to figure out that my hot tub doesn't have Wi-Fi. So it's replaced the search engine as the back and forth piece. So examples of how to use it that are impressive to a company are, I was doing data analysis to figure out which companies in my area should be on my approach list. I work with AI to figure out what is my goal set, what's my ideal hiring profile, what's the company that I want to hire me. It came up with suggestions, and then I asked it, challenge me. How do I become of value to those companies?
Uh, that sounds like a really good idea, and kind of what I'm taking away from this. And please let me know if I'm wrong. It sounds like the AI is a really good like clarifier of information. So you've got to come up with some of like the hard hitting or investigation questions first. But once you do that, like AI can do like the hard digging and bring you all that data, and then you kind of pick and choose what you want to use.
Well, I turned that around with Grok. I asked Grok, what should I be asking? Then pause. Let it hit you with, here's all the stuff you should be asking. You do the same with Claude, do the same with one of the others, because you can ask AI how best to use AI. Make that the very first thing you ask. And it's not watching a YouTube video on somebody lecturing you on how to use AI. It's walk me step by step through the best way. Case in point, I had to realize you can't feed 400 pages to AI and get anything good out of it. So I asked the AI platform, how do I work with you best? And it said 20 pages at a time, or it said, do it a chapter and then let me, and so it taught me how to break up the work. AI will also teach you how to work with it to do research, how to get the best results out of it.
That's fantastic. I guess one other quick thing is, do you find that the approach is changing a little bit as these new models come out? Like GPT-5 just came out, and I guess it's got like a much bigger context window. So have you tried that yet? And have you seen, has it been giving you the ability to like upload more pages, or you still kind of have some of that same like technical limitation?
John, you asked a terrific question. I'm going to give you a quick example. I had to go out to dinner with a client the other day in a city that neither of us had ever been to. I turned on the deep research part of Gemini, and I said, hey, I need a restaurant. It's in this city. I want it to have these characteristics. I want it to be on the water. I want it to be this. I want it to be that. I want it to be the other. Then I got to watch the model. This is new. This is what 5 does as well in ChatGPT. I got to watch the model think. Now, any of you who are married and your spouse thinks like this, that model went out to 70 websites and it's pulling this and it's pulling that. And I'm watching it and it thinks exactly like my wife does. Oh my God. I mean, it just went completely ape on the topic, pulled in tons of information. Then the new thing in the models is it'll pause and say, now that could be total BS. How would I find out? And then the AI then goes back through. The first generation of AI, you'd ask it a question, it would give you an answer. Now what you're doing is you're asking a question. Before it gives you the answer, it thinks about the answer. And then it comes back to you with that first. You used to have to prompt it to do that. Are you lying to me? Were you lying to me then, or are you lying to me now? But so you'll watch it think, and that's entertaining to be one thing. But I will tell you, the restaurant Gemini picked was perfect in every way. I never would have gone to 70 websites. I wouldn't have gone to 3. I'm a dude. That's how we think. But I think the key there is, you're right. The models are constantly changing, and they're learning so much faster than we do. When I started offshoring, it would take me a year to get an offshore team to 60% of the level of quality as the onshore team. I can do that in an afternoon with AI. And a year from now, the AI will be 80, 85% as good as the onshore team. So just the speed with which things are changing means if you tinkered with AI a year and a half ago, and it just seemed like garbage, it was essentially garbage a year and a half ago. It's not garbage anymore.
That is so helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Great questions.
Look at that. We got John's question answered.
And honestly, if there's ever anything, the company I'm on the board for now uses AI to automate chunks of the discovery process for consulting firms. One of the biggest challenges as a consultant is going in and figuring out how things actually work. So we're using AI to automate that piece. So let me give more time for any more questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Cedric.
Hey, good morning, Stephen. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
Yeah, I find the conversation about AI pretty fascinating myself, but I wanted to touch back into negotiating for salary.
Yes.
So what we've learned is, well, at least in TAP's class, is you don't really negotiate salary until you're given a job offer. Once you're given a job offer, how you were talking about veterans falling for pretty much getting played, not getting the salary that we should be getting for the value that we provide. What kind of tips, if you could talk a little bit more on what kind of tips and things that you did to avoid, falling into that trap?
Cool. Great question. First suggestion is make sure you're getting the right level of job. If they've got like analyst 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where a lot of veterans get played is they think, well, I know I can hit analyst 2. I might be able to hit analyst 3. Going for analyst 4 is a stretch. That I probably shouldn't go for analyst 4. I'll tell you what civilians do is they go for analyst 4, talk me down. Not I'm going for analyst 2, talk me up. So that's how you can start to put your thumb on the scale for the salary based on the level that you're going for. And they're absolutely right. Salary negotiations are tough because the hiring company has all the cards. The thing I do a lot of is negotiating for non-cash compensation. So cash is king. We're all concerned about the base. Cool. What's my title going to be? Especially in mid-sized companies, you'll find even if they can't negotiate salary, they'll negotiate with you on those other things that 5 years from now will look phenomenal on your resume. One of the reasons I took the 75% pay cut, jumped out of tech into gaming, was because that was the first time I was ever a chief operating officer. I've been a COO now 3 different times because I did that one move. So look for those non-cash things that you can get. Now, if you're going for a giant programmatic company, do not believe it when they say you're going to be a director in 2 years, that sort of thing. Any forward promises like that are meaningless. It just is, unless you're firmly in a program that has that as the output. But negotiate that as you're looking at the program terms. What's variable, what's determined, what's definite. If it's variable, try to find ways to tilt the balance in your favor. And if you are negotiating salary, it is usually too late to say, I think my skills command this in the workplace. It is a perfectly valid negotiation tactic to say that, especially if you've got, Glassdoor was mentioned in the comments, if you've got information you can push across and say, look, this is kind of what I was expecting. Sometimes I've been hiring negotiators for a long, long time. I have never once hired a negotiator who accepted my first offer. Now, here in Florida, engineers, people get ticked off if you don't accept the first offer. Engineers tend to be very much more linear and that sort of thing. So think about the industry group that you're going for. And yeah, terrific point. That if you don't ask, you don't get. The worst thing they can say is no. The thing is, don't ask for something crazy, because you need to be asking based on what they need versus what you want. That's hugely important. Because if you say, I want to make sure I never encounter the letter E in any of your written stuff, I never want to see that letter. Obviously, that's a crazy ask. But it can be very similar to say, I want to work a 3-day work week. Well, that company doesn't work a 3-day work week. They don't have anybody work a 3-day work week. But a lot of people, especially a lot of younger people, will issue that demand not having done any research for how that company actually works. Or I don't want to be subject to ITAR. We have that a lot in tech. I don't want to be subject to all the ridiculous restrictions around arms exporting. Well, the company doesn't get to make that give. They can't give you that. So asking for it wastes an opportunity to ask for something you want that they could give. And again, if you're going for a big company or even a mid-sized company, and it's a very structured programmatic play, there's a limited amount of real negotiating you can do. One of the things people hate doing is playing board games with me, because I play the board game as if every single spot at the board is mine. And I'm brokering all the deals around the table. I'm a nightmare to play Monopoly with. But I go into every negotiation like that. That's a little bit over the top. So I think that you just understand what can be negotiated, but then get creative about what can't be negotiated, and look for things they could give you on because they feel bad they can't give you the thing. Does that help at all?
Great, Stephen. Yeah, I think it left me with some things to think about. where I'm living now, the cost of living is lower, so I can't expect, you know, 6-figure job unless I'm thinking of moving or working a remote job. So now I have some more things to think about.
Well, I think the thing I would really suggest is I made a big mistake when I left Palisade because I was focused outside Florida for so long. For a year, I focused exclusively in my geography, and I missed a ton of opportunities. There are a lot of companies that need people with certain skills and are willing to get very creative about where you are. And one of the things I found a lot in tech was there are a couple of tech companies that pay everybody as if they live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Those are great companies to go work for because I'm living in Florida. My bills are not the same as living in Palo Alto. So, you know, that's one way to kind of work the system in your favor. So, and you know, drop me a line if you want to talk about one. So,
Great. Thanks, Stephen.
sure.
No, great question, Cedric. Thank you so much. Please, if you have a question for Stephen here, please hit the raise your hand button. We'll call on you. But thank you so much for your time, Stephen. Such an amazing. Thank you so much for pouring in and giving those insights and this document too that you spoke from. It's something that I've already favorited that I'm going to refer back to as well and kind of about this conversation we've had. So I do appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I was happy to be here. And if y'all want me back, I'm happy to come back.
Yes. I will. I'll reach out to you and look at some days to bring you back for sure. 100%. So, well, if there's no other questions, again, I want a huge thank you to you. Thank you so much for your time, your experience, the valuable insights that you did give us. It's such an amazing opportunity to speak with someone like you with your experience, and then also kind of answer some of those questions that we've had kind of lingering out there, right? The question that John had about the AI stuff is impacts every single student on this call, right? On how to best utilize these new skills and these new tools out there, the best way to make that first step forward. And I see Jose just raised his hand, so I want to give an opportunity before we jump off. Go ahead,
Absolutely.
Jose.
Hey, Steven, thank you for coming talk to us today. Honestly, one of the best AI talks I've heard in a while, if not the best one. But I wanted to ask you, seeing as how it's evolving, right? I agree with you. Like using AI is not going to be negotiable in the future, in the foreseeable future. Do you see it being a liability for companies, though? Like, there's cases already that AI, like machine learning, has been taught. For example, there's a real case where it got taught pictures of a party and there were no black dudes in the party. So it inadvertently became a racist AI, like, and there was a liability for that. Do you see that happening like in the resume screening and all these AI interviews and things like that?
Yeah, you're asking a COO about risk. I got to tell you, one of the biggest challenges for me was when I flipped my brain from operations to sales is, you know, when I go to sales, I don't care about risk anymore. When I'm in operations, I live inside risk. I'm terrified of risk. And, you know, we've seen, what was it, New York City had an AI that you could ask about what's legal, what's illegal. And the AI was saying, oh, you can do all this stuff. Totally wrong. I mean, just absolutely totally wrong. So I think the thing I tell people a lot about AI, one of the hats I wear is IT industry analyst. I look at AI as something that came from one of my kids. Now, all my kids are 21 now. I totally trust them. When they were 5, not so much, right? So what I do is when AI gives me something, I worry about it. In a company, when AI gives you something, that question you asked is on somebody else's server. It's somewhere else. And that breaches all kinds of confidentiality responsibilities. So there's huge risk in big companies. And that can be a good thing to do when you're in the interview process. I'm saying, I'm glad you brought this up because you can say, now, while I understand there's enormous risk that's created by using third-party AI, here's how I've used it for myself, but I see the risk that's created inside companies. So I'd be very interested in what your policy is on how to use it. Do you have sort of, you know, your own LLMs behind the firewall? Do you have approved AI processes you can use? Because I'd certainly want to stay inside those when I start using them here. And it's a great way to really tell your prospective employer you're aware of the risks created, and you're not going to say, I am negotiating with the Air Force about their new secret missile. Should I do X to ChatGPT? That would be a really bad thing for somebody at Lockheed to do, you know. So I think you raise a terrific point. I think you can shine a light on it as something that you have thought about, but still be one of the good guy that I know here at the incubator. As you can tell from my background, that's not me. I work in an incubator that used to be a skate park indoors, but he said that he was really thinking about, he's not allowed to have a LinkedIn profile. He's not allowed to have any kind of exposure to the public. And he was thinking, how do I start using AI? Well, I sat down with him and I'm like, well, you play Dungeons and Dragons, dude. You know, use AI to create your campaign world. Use AI to design your weather. Use AI to do this, dude. And he started using AI for those purposes. Completely anonymous. It's just for his gaming. It's a hobby. Another good friend of mine does woodworking the same way. You still are using the tool. And then remember, you're going to reframe it. You're not going to say, for my D&D campaign, I did this. You say, I got interested in this and I used AI to learn more about it. You know, so it's all about framing in a way that you're happy about talking about during the job interview.
Man, huge thanks, and we definitely got to connect because you got a lot of information about AI that I'm interested in because I'm going through it now. Like I use Copilot myself,
Yeah.
but I do the same thing. I ask Copilot, and then I put in ChatGPT and fact check them, and I was like, oh, I do that.
I love getting them fighting. That's my favorite. So,
Yep.
but yeah, I mean, I think that the one thing I tell everybody on the call is play with it. Just play with it. And you know, you couldn't play with Microsoft Excel back in the day. You know, so everybody expected you to know how to use Microsoft Excel. You can play with AI in a way that you've never been able to play with some of these tools before, and it's largely free, at least so far. So,
No, great question, Jose. Go ahead, Jamal.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for
Good.
coming. I really enjoyed your session. This is kind of like a G-Wiz thing. I'm a huge AI like person. My friends always joke on me about I've been messing around with it for like the last year and a half. The jumps and leaps are insane. It's hard to keep up with. Like every week, it seems like whatever was crazy this week, it's been subverted. I do music, so for like music videos, things like that. You don't need to go and really actually hire photographers or videographers anymore. You can just create your entire persona, truly look like you, sound like you, fully on when it comes to stuff like that. From a writing perspective, I'm doing an animated podcast as well. But one of the things I do kind of like ask myself, it's more just you as conversational piece, not really like a thing, is some of the ethical portions of it. I had been doing a lot of jobs and a lot of people's livelihood changes. So for example, like my podcast that I use, well, I do some voice acting, and while I do have other friends and different people that I might hire to do some voice acting, a lot of the voice stuff is done through AI, right? Because it's there, it's great, it's easy, it's cheaper, right? There's a crazy amount of archive voices. Another thing is like I've seen a couple of different like documentaries and things about the AI learning. Like while AI does utilize material that's already out, there are physically like the human portion of that, people like being like, hey, this is what murder looks like. This is what this thing looks like. And it's talking about like the mental effects of like the humans that are responsible for teaching AI some things, especially some of the darker X, Y, and Z things in humanity, and like their mental toll of having to look at this stuff and just say this is what this is, AI. So how do you think like that's going to move in the future from like a morality standpoint?
oof. I think the ethical use of AI is a huge challenge because we've never had a technology that thought. We've never had a technology that looked like it was thinking. Nobody really cared that Clippy, boy, I'm dating myself, but Clippy used to be this thing from Microsoft Office that would pop up and says, looks like you're typing a resume. You want help? Nobody really cared what Clippy thought, right? So I think that's the key is we have this new technology and we're terrible at figuring out the moral and ethical implications of new technology. We're just as a society, as a culture, as a race, we're just awful at it. So I think the thing that we can do is the only thing we can do is, police our own use of it. You raise a terrific point though about, we're using AI to take away the stuff about being human that's fun, the being creative, being, creating music, creating content, creating stuff. And that is the fastest thing for AI to get a hold of. And what's left is I need to sit here and turn this crank because we can't trust AI to do it yet. And that's disappointing. It's dispiriting. I think the thing we have to just trust in ourselves is that, look, I can only police my use of it. Case in point, I don't use AI to produce final content. I do use AI to produce the initial outline. Nothing saying that's a requirement for me, but that's my moral position on it. But I'm not going to try and impose that on anybody else. I just say that, as you start to realize the power of the tool, decide what you yourself are comfortable with and stay inside that. That's, I think, all we could do.
I agree. And I think too, like I've seen a lot of things have already started to shift on social media. Like there's platforms and equivalents to like Instagram, X, Y, and Z that popping up that specifically forbid any form of AI, like art stuff. So music, creations, things like that. And then like the value of like artwork and things like that growth has been going up when it comes to like non-human. It's so interesting to see that like non-human artwork is now is valued higher than AI artwork. It's just
it's like pottery. If you go to a commune of potters in New Mexico, you're going to value the pot you got from the pot, meaning like a clay pot. I've talked a lot about weed here. Probably not a good idea for me to land on that. But I think the thing is, yes, you value that more because a human made it. It wasn't made in a factory somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think we may end up something like that. I think one of the things I had to realize in my profession negotiating, it's going to be my AI talking to your AI. And then what the AIs can't agree on, you and I will have to talk about. But it's going to be 3 things instead of 40. And I want that time in my life back. I think you do too. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, I'll say this real fast too. Just in general, don't know who watches anime or whatever. I'm a nerd, but there's an anime called Pluto on Netflix. It's real short. It's like 8 episodes, and it does such a phenomenal job of exploring human interaction with AI. And it's not, and it doesn't take place in some futuristic, like, 3,000 years from now. It's really like where we could be at in 20 years, 30 years. It's a really cool thing to look up. Pluto on Netflix. Yeah. But thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Great. Thanks.
Awesome. Great question, Jamal. Again, thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you so much for your time coming in today. Wish you all the best. And like I said, I'll reach out to you because I'd love for you to come back as our class continues to grow and we get more and more students into this academy. I feel like they need to hear from you, and I want to make sure.
This was a great conversation. And the thing I would say is, if you're trying to figure out how to do networking, put your chips on that because it's who you talk to that is going to connect you to the next job more than any other thing.
Excellent. All
right.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Stephen.
Great. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Good luck.
All right, everybody. You know what time it is. I mean, I thought that was a great conversation from Stephen. And I think that started off our day really, really well. Obviously, right now it's lunchtime, so go ahead, get up, go have some lunch, come back. We've got 2 more amazing sessions after lunch today. They'll be scrolling here in just a moment to kind of highlight those speakers. Right after lunch, we've got Gary Borden from USAA, and then we also got Nate Boyer from Merging Vets and Players. 2 amazing speakers that are coming in this afternoon for you. But let me know if you have any questions, but enjoy your lunch and we'll see you back at 2 p.m. Eastern time.